Hey everybody, welcome back to another deck tech video. This reiteration is going to be my most anticipated deck tech for Rivals of Ixalan, Black-White Vampires. Now, if you want to buy any of these cards I'm about to show you, or any of the new Rivals of Ixalan cards in general, buy them over at flipsidegaming.com. If you use my promo code GREAT at checkout, you can save 10% off of your purchases over $10. Link for the website will be in the description below. Before we get into it, I got one more thing to talk about. Usually I integrate gameplay into my deck techs in order to show some of the synergies or cool things that can happen in the decks I make. However, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my hands on all the cards in this deck on MTGO. I still play tested it on proxy sites, but as of right now, there will be no gameplay footage in this video or gameplay videos to follow this video like there usually is. If you guys still want, I can do those videos later when I get my hands on all the cards. Okay, now that I've said everything I need to have said, let's go over the deck. The point of my first Black-White Vampires was to go wide and win through numbers, which this new version of the deck still aims for, but I dialed it down a little bit more to add some different things to the deck. With that being said, let's talk about our early drops, which are Legion's Landing, Duskborn Sky Marcher, Metallic Mimic, Dusk Legion Zealot, and Legion Lieutenant. All these are pretty much self-explanatory on why they might be in here. Metallic Mimic and Legion Lieutenant are Lords. Dusk Legion Zealot gives us card draw on a 2-drop, which is always useful. Duskborn Sky Marcher is a 1-drop that can pump an attacking vampire when itself becomes too weak to attack with. And Legion's Landing gives us another 1-drop that can flip over and turn into a vampire token generator. These cards all have their specific purposes and help us establish an early game as well as it helping our mid and end game. Now it's time for the rest of the creatures in the deck. Yahenni Undying Partisan, Twilight Prophet, Sanctum Seeker, Maven Fiend, Dusk Apostle, and Bishop of Binding take up the last of our creature spots. There's a lot going on in between these 5 different creatures, and since I won't have MTGO gameplay to show some of these synergies, I'm just going to have to take some time to explain them. Yahenni Undying Partisan was a last-minute entry, replacing the few copies of Champion of Dusk I was originally playing. Not that Champion of Dusk was a terrible card, but it didn't really fit our curve well, making too many 4 and 5 drops without a lot of good 3 drops. Now, don't think that Yahenni was just a curve-fixing card that I swapped in. I chose him for good reason. He grows bigger when we kill some of our opponent's creatures or they trade in combat. But not only that, he also has haste. Oh, and on top of that, he can make himself indestructible by sacrificing some of our non-important creatures anymore, like a vampire token, Duskborn Sky Marcher, or Dusk Legion Zealot. He has a lot of different synergies in the deck, and it was hard not to make him the replacement for Champion of Dusk. Twilight Prophet is next on the list. This card is only good if you have the City's Blessing. But if you do, it basically turns into a Dark Confidant that drains your opponent of life instead of just pinging you. It was extra card draw on a creature, which we desperately needed. Sanctum Seeker gives us even more life-draining abilities, turning our massive army of vampires into even more trouble for our opponent. This card was a favorite of mine in my Ixalan version of this deck, and it's still one of my favorites here. It's still one of our win conditions, next to our Lords. Maven Fiend, Dusk Apostle, has been reduced to only 2 copies in this deck. There's times where he's very useful, but his low survivability hurts this card a lot, so I reduced him to 2 copies in hopes that other cards in this deck can protect him. And finally, Bishop of Binding. It's removal on a creature that can also buff up a vampire when he attacks. Again, his survivability is really low, except maybe when he attacks, so I only put 2 copies of him in here. But essentially, he gives us a lot of tempo, so it is definitely worth playing him. That's it for our creatures. There's a lot going on there, but again, our main goal for the creatures was to go wide while gaining value at the same time, and I feel this deck accomplishes that. But now for our non-creature spells. And there's only 2 we haven't discussed yet because I counted Legion's Landing as a creature. Fatal Push and Radiant Destiny are our final 2 spells in the deck. Fatal Push is just removal. It pairs well with the Yahenni, of course. There's just no better black removal card out there at the moment. And Radiant Destiny follows Twilight Prophet in that it has Ascend. However, this card doesn't need Ascend in order to be good or even useful for us. It's basically another Lord for us, which is good, making it now that we have 3 separate cards in our deck that act as Lords. Radiant Destiny, however, being the best of the bunch. It's an enchantment, which means it can't easily get blown up, except by cast out, really. And if you did get the City's Blessing, it gives your vampires vigilance, which is very strong when you got a wide board. Our land base is simple. 4 Concealed Courtyard, 10 Swamp, and 9 Plains for a total of 23 lands. If you're up to paying a little bit more, you could throw in 2 copies of Field of Ruins, replacing a basic land of each type, because Search for Azcanta is probably going to get better now that Energy and Rhyming Up Red both got hit pretty bad in yesterday's bannings. As for the sideboard is going to be tricky, and honestly, you might want to change it depending on what the meta in Standard turns out to be in the next few months. But here's what I got so far. Cast Out against Midrange Deck and Scarab God, Crook of Condemnation against Graveyard Strategies, Duress against Control, and Gifted Aetherborn and Inspiring Cleric against Aggro. Again, these could and probably will change depending on what decks become top tier in the next coming months. That's it for this video, guys, but before you leave, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed, and also subscribe if you haven't already. You can even vote for which deck you want to see me go over next. The voting will be in the top right-hand corner. That little eye icon, go ahead and click that and vote there. Anyways, thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech.